We jumped on them, kicked them, and pushed them. When the rods were in their holes, we tried to put the canvas cover on the boat. Jack took one part of the cover. He tied it at the front of the boat. Mark stood in the middle to help Jack with the cover. Jack did his job well, but Mark was completely confused. After 10 minutes of hard work, Mark was inside the cover. He was fighting to get out. He accidentally knocked Jack down. Now Jack was inside the cover, too. They fought with the cover. I heard some very bad words. I thought the job must be very difficult. I didn't understand what was happening. Jack and Mark had told M. Morenzi and me to stand at the back of the boat. We did exactly that. We waited quietly. We saw the cover moving violently, but we thought this was the correct method. After a long time, we heard Jack shout, "We can't breathe under here. Why don't you help us, you idiot?" When someone calls for help, I always answer. I went to help them. Poor Mark. His face was almost black. Chapter 6. Mark makes scrambled eggs. As soon as the cover was in place, we started to prepare supper. We wanted some hot water to make tea, so we put the tea kettle on the stove. We pretended that we were not interested in the water. We wanted the water to think that we did not care about it. We began to prepare supper. This was the only way to make the water boil on a boat. If the water knows you are waiting for it, it will never get hot. You must not look at it. It's a good idea to shout, "I don't want any tea, do you, Jack?" Jack shouted back, "Oh, no, I don't like tea. I'll have milk." "And you, Mark?" "Tea is terrible. I never drink it. I'll have lemonade." This makes the water very angry. At this point, the water will boil. We really wanted that supper. We needed that supper. For 35 minutes, nobody spoke. We just ate and ate. Finally, we all had full stomachs, and we were happy. A full stomach makes you feel kind and generous. We sat and smiled at each other. We smiled at Montmorency, too. We started smoking our pipes and began to talk. We went to bed at 10 o'clock. I didn't sleep well. I wasn't comfortable in the boat. I woke up at 6 a.m. the next morning, and Jack did too. There was no reason to wake up so early. We were on holiday. Why did we wake up so early? It never happens to us when we're working. We decided to wake up Mark. This was hard work. We used an oar to help us. Mark moved a bit and said, "I'll be downstairs in a minute. Get my best boots ready, please." We tried again with a boat hook. Mark sat up suddenly and Montmorency fell off the bed. We pulled up the canvas cover and all four of us looked out at the river. We were very cold. We had planned to go swimming, but the water looked so cold and wet. "Well, who's going swimming first?" asked Mark. No one wanted to be first. Jack decided to get dressed. Montmorency barked with horror at the idea. Mark went to look for his trousers. I decided to go to the riverbank and throw some water on myself. I held on to the branch of a tree as I moved to the water. It was very cold, and I decided not to go in. I wanted to go back to the boat, but suddenly the branch of the tree broke. I fell into the river along with my towel. I also drank about a bottle of Tam's water. Good heavens! Old Jay is in the water, Mark said. How's the water? Jack asked. It's lovely, I answered. Why don't you come in? Nobody wanted to try the water. When I got back to the boat, I was very cold. I wanted to put on my shirt, but it fell into the river. This made me angry. Jack started laughing. I don't see anything to laugh at, I said. Jack laughed even more. I never saw a man laugh so much. I was cold and furious. I was trying to get my shirt out of the river. Jack was laughing louder and louder. Stop laughing, you stupid idiot, I shouted. When I finally pulled the shirt out of the river, I saw that it wasn't mine. It was Jack's shirt. I started laughing, too. I laughed so much that I dropped the shirt into the river again. Aren't you going to get it out? Said Jack. Who continued laughing? I didn't answer him for a while because I was laughing so much. At last, I said, It isn't my shirt, it's yours. I never saw a man's face change so quickly. What? He shouted. You donkey! I. Why can't you be careful with things? Why don't you go and get dressed? On the riverbank, people like you don't know how to live on a boat. I tried to tell him how funny it was, but he didn't understand. Jack is a little slow at understanding a joke sometimes, Mark said. I'm cooking scrambled eggs for breakfast this morning. Once people try my scrambled eggs, they always want them. He was quite famous for his scrambled eggs. Jack and I got the stove and the frying pan ready. Then we looked for the eggs that weren't broken. We found only 6 of them. Now you can start, we said. Breaking the eggs was difficult for Mark. The eggs got on his trousers and went up his arms. He put 6 eggs into the frying pan. Then he sat down by the stove and mixed them with a fork. Jack and I saw that it was difficult work. Mark often burnt his fingers. Then he danced around the stove. He waved his hands in the air and shouted. Jack and I thought that this was an important part of his cooking method. We didn't know what scrambled eggs were. We thought they were some sort of red Indian food, and to cook them correctly, it was necessary to do special dances with magic words. Montmorency went to put his nose over the frying pan once and burnt himself. He, too, began dancing around and barking. It was interesting and exciting to watch this show. Jack and I were sorry when it was finished. When the scrambled eggs were ready, there was very little. To eat, 6 eggs had gone into the pan, but all that came out was a teaspoonful of burnt eggs. The problem is the frying pan. I need another type of pan and another stove, Mark said. We decided not to try scrambled eggs again until Mark had the right pan and stove. Chapter 7 The Laughing Tin. When we finished breakfast, the sun was up, and it was a warm morning. I sat on the river bank near Runnymede. I thought about King John, who signed the Magna Carta at Runnymede in 1215. What a great moment in English history. I imagined the scene. Jack came over and said, When you finish resting and dreaming, please help me wash the dishes and other things. I cleaned the frying pan with some grass and with Jack's wet shirt. Later on, we went to Magna Carta Island. We saw the stone where the Magna Carta was signed. In this area, King Henry VII met with his sweetheart, Anne Boleyn. I am certain that King Henry VII met Anne Boleyn in several other places, too. We continued slowly up the river and stopped for lunch near Monkey Island. We had cold meat for lunch. "Where's the mustard?" I asked. "The mustard?" Mark said. "We had forgotten to bring the mustard." At that moment, we all wanted mustard more than anything in the world. "How boring life is without mustard," Ed said. We ate our cold meat in silence. We thought about the happy days of childhood when there was lots of mustard on the table. The adult world can be a cruel place. All three of us loved tinned fruit. Jack brought out a tin of pineapple. This was perfect to make us forget the mustard. We felt that life was smiling at us again. "Look at the picture on the tin," said Mark. "Ah, I can't wait," I said. "I'm dreaming about the sweet juice," Jack said. Mark got a spoon ready, then we looked for the tin opener. We took everything out of the 2 hampers. We took everything out of the bag. We looked in every corner of the boat. There was no tin opener. Mark tried to open the tin with a little knife, and he cut himself. Jack tried to open it with a pair of scissors. The scissors flew up and almost cut his eye. I tried to open it with a piece of metal. I did something wrong because I fell into the river. The tin flew away and broke a teacup. Then we all got angry. I started hitting the tin with a piece of wood. Mark hit the tin, and so did Jack. We changed its shape. We made it square, we made it round, then we made it flat, but we still couldn't open it. The tin looked at us and seemed to be laughing. It was ugly, and it frightened us. I threw it in the river. Then we rowed away and didn't stop until we reached Maidenhead. It was evening, and a strong wind started blowing. The wind was behind us, and we put up the sail quickly. The wind blew, and the boat flew up the river. I was steering the boat, and Jack and Mark were enjoying the trip. Sailing is exciting. It's almost like flying. You feel that you are part of nature. We were alone, and we flew along the river. Far in the distance, we saw a small fishing boat. There were 3 fishermen in it. The sun was going down, and there was a red light on the water. The river seemed magic. It was like a dream. We felt that we were sailing into a strange land. We did not sail into a strange land. We sailed straight into the fishing boat with the 3 old fishermen. At first, we didn't know what was happening, but when we heard the bad words that came from the other boat, we knew we were near people. We also knew that those people were not happy. The 3 old fishermen fell off their seats. There were fish all over them. They slowly tried to get up, and as they did this, they cursed us. They didn't curse us with common curses. They used long, special curses. They also cursed our parents, families, friends, neighbors, pets, and jobs. These curses were for the present and the future. Mark stood up and said, "Be thankful for a bit of excitement in your lives. Your lives must be so boring just sitting and fishing all day. My friends and I are very unhappy to hear men of your age use such bad words." The three old men did not agree with Mark. "I'll steer the boat now," Jay said. "Jack, an intelligent man like you must do better things. Leave the steering to me before we all drown." Chapter 8. Montmorency Meets a Cat. At Marlow, we left our boat by the bridge. We spent the night at the Crown Hotel. The next morning, we went swimming before breakfast. On the way back, Montmorency met a cat. Montmorency and I don't agree on cats. I like cats, but Montmorency doesn't. When I meet a cat, I stop and say hello. I pet it gently. The cat is happy, and I am too. When Montmorency meets a cat, the whole street knows about it. A lot of bad words fly through the air. As soon as Montmorency saw the cat, he barked with happiness. The cat was walking slowly across the street. Montmorency ran after the cat, but the cat didn't run. He didn't understand that his life was in danger. This cat was big and black. It had half a tail, half a nose, and only one ear. It was a clever street cat. Montmorency is a courageous dog, but the cold eyes of that cat terrified him. The cat stopped in the middle of the road and looked at Montmorency. Neither spoke, but the conversation was probably like this. Cat: "Yes, you want me? Can I do anything for you?" Montmorency: "No, no, thanks." Cat: "If you really want something, please tell me." Montmorency, walking backwards: "Oh, no, not at all. Don't disturb yourself. I'm afraid I made a mistake. I thought I knew you. Sorry I disturbed you." Cat: "Not at all. It's a pleasure." "Are you sure you don't want anything now?" Montmorency, still walking backwards: "No, thanks. Nothing at all. Thanks. Very kind of you. Good morning." Cat: "Good morning." The cat got up and walked away. Montmorency came back and followed us quietly. He was silent all day long. To this day, if you say the word cats to Montmorency, he'll stop walking. Then he'll look up at you as if to say, "Please don't." After this, we did our shopping, returned to the boat, and continued our trip up the river. At Hambledon Lock, we discovered that we had no water. We went to the lock keeper to ask for some. Jack spoke for us with a friendly smile. He asked, "May we have some water, please?" "Certainly," said the old lock keeper. "Take as much as you want and leave the rest." "Thank you very much," said Jack, looking around. "Where is the water?" "It's where it always is," said the lock keeper. "It's behind you." Jack turned around and looked. "I don't see it." "What? Where are your eyes?" the lock keeper said. He took Jack's arm and turned him around. "Oh, Jack," said, "but we can't drink the river." "No, but you can drink some of it," said the lock keeper. "I've drunk river water for the past 15 years. "Well, sir, I don't think you look very healthy after drinking all that river water, but thank you anyway," Jack said. We left the lock keeper's place and found some water at another house. We towed the boat past Henley and stopped near Wargrave for lunch. We were sitting in a green field near the river. Mark was cutting a meat pie. Jack and I were waiting with our dishes. "I need a spoon," said Mark. The hamper was behind us. Jack and I both turned around to get a spoon. In 5 seconds, we had the spoon. When we turned back, Mark and the meat pie were gone, disappeared. It was a wide-open field. There were no trees nearby. Mark did not fall into the river because the river was far from us. Jack and I looked all around. Then we looked at each other. "Has he gone up to heaven?" I asked. "Angels don't take meat pies to heaven," Jack said. "You're right," I agreed. "Then there has been an earthquake." Jack said, "I'm sorry." He had the meat pie with him. Sadly, we looked at the place where Mark and the meat pie were sitting. Then, with horror, we saw Mark's head. Only his head. It was in the grass. His face was red and furious. Jack was the first to speak. "Say something. Are you dead or alive? Where is your body?" "Oh, don't be an idiot!" Mark shouted. "I think you made this happen. You told me to sit there. It's your stupid joke. Here, take the pie." Mark didn't know it, but he had been sitting next to a big hole. The long grass covered it. He fell into the deep hole without knowing. At first he thought that it was the end of the world. Mark still thinks that Jack and I planned it all. Chapter 9. Fighting Swans. After lunch, a gentle wind pushed us up the river past Wargrave and Ship Lake. We got out of the boat at Sunning and walked around the village. Sunning is a lovely village. Everything is clean and beautiful. Each house is covered with roses. We decided to return to one of the Ship Lake Islands to spend the night. Jack said, "Let's have a special supper tonight. Let's make an Irish stew. We can put everything into one big pan." "What a wonderful idea," Mark and I said. "I'll get the wood and make a fire," Jack said. "You two can peel the potatoes." This was a very big job. We were happy and excited, but when we peeled our first potato, we understood that this was not exciting. It was hard work. The first potato we peeled looked like a pea. Jack looked at it and said, "No, no, no. There's no potato left. Do it like this." We worked hard for half an hour, but we peeled only 4 potatoes. We refused to continue. "Well, just put the potatoes in without peeling them. Let's add some carrots and other vegetables. Look in the hampers and take out all the pieces of old food. We'll put them in the stew. You can put anything in a stew." We found half a pork pie, a tin of fish, and a few broken eggs. We added these to the stew. Montmorency watched us carefully and then left. After a while, he returned with a dead rat in his mouth. He wanted to add something to the stew, too. We discussed it first. Mark said, "It's all right to add the dead rat. It will be mixed with the other things. A stew needs many ingredients." Jack said, "Well, I don't want to try anything new. Maybe next time." "I'm sorry, Montmorency," Mark said. "If you never try anything new, you'll never discover things. It's men like you, Jack, who slow down the progress of our world." Jack didn't listen to Mark. The stew was a great success. It was delicious, excellent in every way. We all really enjoyed it. After the fish stew, Jack and I decided to go to Henley for an evening walk. Mark wanted to stay on the boat and drink whiskey. When we returned to the boat, Mark was sad and confused. "What happened to you?" "Mark, swans," he said. We had left the boat near a swan's nest. When Jack and I were in Henley, Mrs. Swan came back to the nest. She started to shout at Mark. Mark frightened her away. She went to get her husband, Mr. Swan. Mark had a terrible fight with these two swans. Mark finally won the fight. However, half an hour later, Mr. and Mrs. Swan returned with 18 other swans. There was a horrible fight. The swans attacked Mark and tried to pull him off the boat. They wanted to drown Mark in Montmorency. Mark fought with courage for 4 hours. In the end, the swans slowly swam away to die. "How many swans were there?" Jack asked. 32, said Mark, who was sleepy. "But you said 18 before," Jack said. "No, I didn't. I said 12. Do you think I can't count?" We never discovered the truth about the swans. We asked Mark about it the next morning. He said, "What swans?" He thought that Jack and I were dreaming. That night, Mark had trouble sleeping. He woke me up about 12 times during the night. He was looking for his clothes. "Jack woke you up too. Why do you need your trousers? It's the middle of the night," Jack said later. Mark was looking for his shoes. Then he asked for his socks and his umbrella. We woke up late the next morning. We had a small breakfast and were ready to go. We agreed that we would row the boat and not tow it. Mark said, "Jack, you and Jay can row. I'll steer." I didn't like this idea, and I said, "No, Mark. You and Jack row so that I can rest. I was doing too much work on this trip. I always think that I work too much. It's not because I don't like work. I love it. I find it very interesting. I can sit and look at it for hours. You can't give me too much work. I like collecting it. My office is full of it. I'm very careful with my work, too. Some of the work in my office has been there for years. It is in perfect condition. It isn't dirty or anything. That's because I take good care of it." Mark said, "On this boat, I'm the only one who works." Jack said, "You do nothing but eat and sleep." "Mark, I'm the only one who works. You and Jay are very lazy people." Mark laughed and said, "Jack? Work? Have you ever seen Jack work?" I agreed with Mark. Jack never worked. "How do you know if I work, Mark? You're always sleeping except at meal times. Have you ever seen Mark awake except at meal times?" Jack asked me. I agreed with Jack. Mark worked very little on the boat. "Oh, please! I do more work than old Jay," Mark said. "Well, it's difficult to do less work than old Jay," Jack added. "Old Jay thinks he's a passenger and doesn't need to work." After this discussion, I said to Mark, "You and Jack row the boat up to Reading. At Reading, I'll tow it." Chapter 10. 3 Men Out of a Boat. We reached Reading at about 2 o'clock. The river here is very dirty, so we moved on to Streatley. We stayed at Streatley for 2 days. We took our clothes to a laundry woman. We had tried to wash them in the river. As Jack told us, the river was so dirty that our clothes collected all the dirt from the water. The river became cleaner, but our clothes became dirtier. The laundry woman was very surprised to see such dirty clothes. She looked at them and said, This will cost you 3 times the usual price." We agreed and paid her. The river near Streatley and Goring is excellent for fishing. It is full of different types of fish. Some people sit and fish there all day. However, they never catch any fish. The local fisherman's guidebook doesn't say anything about catching fish. It only says that the place is a good fishing area. And it is. You can see many fish swim past, but you can't catch them. When you go for a walk by the river, you can see hundreds of fish. They come and stand half out of the water, their mouths open for bread. If you go swimming, they come to look at you and disturb you. You cannot catch them. However, we passed by Wallingford and Dorchester. Both are ancient British towns. In the days of the Roman Empire, the Romans camped here and built fortifications. We spent the night at Clifton Hampton, which is a pretty village. We finally arrived at Oxford and spent 2 excellent days there. Oxford is a beautiful town with its old university. Oxford is also full of dogs. Montmorency was very happy. He had 11 dog fights on the first day and 14 on the second day. He probably thought he was in heaven. We left Oxford on the 3rd day to return home to London. When we left Oxford, it was raining. The rain continued without stopping. When it's sunny, the river is a dream. But when it's rainy, the river is brown and unfriendly. It rained all day. At first, we pretended to enjoy it. "Well, this is a nice change. Too much sunshine is boring. Nature is beautiful even when it rains," I said. "Yes," Mark said. "It's good to see the river in all kinds of weather. The rain is good for you. I can't understand people who are afraid of a little rain." Mark and I sang songs, and we were quite happy. Jack did not agree. He stayed under the umbrella. We put up the canvas cover before lunch, leaving a little opening to see where we were going. We continued our trip for another 9 miles. We stopped for the night at Day's Lock. We did not have a happy evening. The rain never stopped. Supper was not good. We were really tired of cold meat. We dreamt about our favorite foods. Mark talked about fish cooked in a special sauce. Mark gave his cold meat to Montmorency. He looked at it and turned his head. He seemed insulted by Mark's offer. He went to sit at the other side of the boat alone. Jack said, "Please don't talk about good food until I finish this cold meat." We played cards after supper. After that, we had some hot water and whiskey. Jack told us about a man he knew. This man had slept on the river in a wet boat like ours. He got very ill and died 10 days later. Of course, we began talking about other illnesses. After a while, Mark said, "I've got an awful headache. It must be the rain." "Well, I've got a bad backache," I said. To make us feel happier, Jack sang to us. That made Mark and me cry, and it made Montmorency howl. There was nothing else to do, so we went to bed. We didn't sleep well at all. We were awake at 5 a.m. the next morning. Our second rainy day was the same as the first. It rained all day. We moved slowly along the river. We agreed to continue our trip, even if it killed us. "It's only 2 more days," Mark said. "We're young and healthy. Maybe we'll be all right." We talked about our evening. With this weather, we can have dinner and take a walk in the rain, or we can have dinner and spend an hour in a pub, I said. That's not very exciting, said Jack. It's much more interesting to go to the Alhambra Theatre in London, said Mark, and then have supper at that little French restaurant. I added, but we have decided to stay and die on this boat, said Jack. However, there's a train that leaves Pangbourne after 5 o'clock. It gets to London in time to eat something and then go to the theater. Everyone was silent. We didn't say one word. We looked at one another. Then we got out the big bag and got our clothes ready. 20 minutes later, 3 men and a dog were going to the railway station. We lied to the boatman at Pangbourne. We didn't have the courage to tell him the truth. We were running away from the rain. We asked him to take care of the boat until the next morning. If something happens, we'll write to you, we said, telling him a big lie. We reached Paddington Station at 7 o'clock. We went directly to the restaurant and had a small meal. Montmorency stayed at the restaurant while we went to the theater. We'll return at 10:30 for the dog and for a good supper, I told the restaurant owner. The man at the ticket office of the theater said, "Oh, you're the famous acrobats from the Haima Mountains. You're late for the performance. Please use the side door." We explained to him that we were not acrobats. He understood and sold us 3 tickets. Our clothes probably looked a bit old and strange. At the Alhambra Theater, everyone looked at our clothes and smiled. Some people laughed. After the theater, we went back to the restaurant. We enjoyed our delicious supper. After 10 days of eating cold meat, we were thankful for this supper. We ate it without speaking. Then we sat back and felt happy and kind. Mark, who was sitting next to the window, pulled back the curtain. He looked at the wet street. It was rainy and dark. The wind was blowing. A few people walked past under their umbrellas. Mark took his glass and said, "Well, we had a good trip, and I say thank you to old Father Thames. But I think we were right to come back when we did. Here's to 3 men well out of a boat." Montmorency stood on his back legs in front of the window. He looked at the wet street and gave a short bark of agreement. The end.